Alright, hello, and welcome to my next video. Today I'll be talking about a paper where some researchers grew a plant in lunar soil for the first time. So, go over the importance, then the results of the paper, the plants they were able to grow, and finally what they're going to do with the results that they have, and how they're going to move ahead with these plants. First of all, why would you want to grow plants on the moon? Obviously for, space exploration is the main reason. The biggest challenges of making a lunar base, having a human establishment on the moon, is keeping it self-sustainable, and this has to be done by getting enough water, getting enough air, and getting enough food, among other things. But the water, hopefully we can get from the moon itself, but the food and the air are pretty hard, and plants would actually solve both of these, since you can feed in carbon dioxide and get oxygen out of the plants, in addition to just growing plants and eating them. But the biggest issue with this is, well, there's multiple issues, but one of the bigger ones is getting actual soil to grow the plants in. Obviously, we can't just get a bunch of soil from Earth and bring it to the moon. We have to grow the plants in the soil that we get there. And of course, there's a lot of factors that make lunar soil bad for growing plants, but the first most obvious thing is what is actually in the soil. And if you look at this chart, it shows the abundance of elements in Earth soil versus two different types of lunar soil. And you can see that they're really not that different. And we believe this is because when the moon was actually being formed, it just formed from a piece of Earth that was broken off by an asteroid. But the result of this is that you'd expect lunar soil to work decently well for plants, but the issue is that the environment of the moon is so different from Earth. Instead of having Earth soil, which is dark and rich and has a lot of water and microorganisms and such, the soil on the moon, or we just call it regolith, is essentially a lot of loose rocks that are kind of spaced out, no water, air, or anything, and they're really sharp and jagged. Since, of course, the water, in addition to moistening the soil, weathers it and breaks it down into smoother particles. But on the moon, there's really only a little bit of air to blow things around, and it results in really sharp particles and really small particles as well in the lunar regolith. In addition to these issues with the particles, you also get some different chemicals and some strange things that start to form in a system without any air and with low gravity and a lot of exposure to the sun. It forms little beads of glass due to exposure to the sun and the silicon, in the pieces of rock reacting and forming bits of glass, as well as little droplets of iron as well from micrometeorite impacts, which break off bits of iron or cause iron to melt and then reform into what they call nanophase iron, which is not something we see on Earth, since it's actual metallic iron that's formed into these little pieces, which on Earth, of course, with all the oxygen we have, it would react very quickly and turn into iron oxide, which plants are actually pretty good at dealing with bits of iron oxide in the soil. That's very common on Earth, but when you start trying to grow plants in lunar soil, they don't really know how to deal with these really small pieces of reactive iron, as well as just generally just having different oxidation states of the iron and other things in the soil that can potentially poison the plant. But getting to the actual results of the study, you can see that they have a few different soils that they tried to grow the plants in, with all pretty good results. The first column here shows the something called JSC1A, which is a simulant, which basically means it's an engineered material we made on Earth to mimic the lunar regolith. It has a lot of the same components to it, the same compounds and everything, but you can't model the sharpness of the particles really, and you also can't model the weird beads of glass and iron and such. So instead of acting like a substitute for the lunar soil, it more acts as a control for the study to see if there's some issue with the compounds that are causing the plants to not grow, or if it really is those really fine details that are very specific to the moon. But as you can see, all of the samples seem to grow pretty normal plants, at least in the first part of this figure. And it really comes down to the root structure that starts to get worse in the lunar plants. You can see the first column has these long, thin roots, but the other ones have much shorter roots, look much weaker. Then by the time you get to the bottom of the figure, the simulant plants have grown quite well, whereas the other ones seem to be struggling. Some of them almost look like they're dead, even though I'm assuming they're not. They're just very discolored due to the various stresses that the lunar regolith puts on it. And in order to actually grow plants in this lunar regolith that they've obtained, they have to add what's called a nutrient solution along with some water to you actually give this something for the plants to get from the soil. Because the idea for a lunar base is that you would use the existing lunar soil and all the weird particles and stuff that it has in it, but add things to it for the plants to actually grow using, because otherwise you just have no chance of growing anything there. So this is, you might think of it a little bit cheating. It's not really using the real lunar soil, but this is basically the best you can do and would be fairly realistic. So in this figure, they start analyzing the results a little bit, and you can a little bit more clearly see that they're using 3 different types of lunar soil they got from Apollo 11, Apollo 12, and Apollo 17, which is not too much important, the details of that, but you can tell that the Apollo 11 soil was exposed to the sun and the vacuum of space a little bit more, and it has much worse plants growing in it. One of them is actually dead, and they don't use it for the study. But the quantitative results they get from the study have to do with the gene expression of this plant. So they're using thale cress, which is just a sort of a common plant, but has the genome very well mapped, and they can see the genes that get expressed, based on the environment. And in this case, they can see the stress-related genes. So the part B here with the Venn diagram shows the number of genes associated with stress that get expressed in each of these samples. You see the Apollo 11 and Apollo 12 both have a lot of different genes being expressed, and they're actually not all the same, but they can kind of correspond to similar issues with different things that might be in the soil, or just weird things like those bits of iron or different oxides that might poison the plant, essentially, cause stress in it, and make it harder for it to grow in lunar regolith. As you can tell, most of the plants actually did grow, even if they didn't grow too well. So, for the most part, they're gaining data on this, but it does show that sort of as a proof of concept that you can grow plants in this modified soil. So, pretty interesting results from the study, but what are they going to do with the results in the future? We're nowhere near making a base on the moon, but in theory, this will give us the technology to use in the future, which will allow us to make a greenhouse on the moon or start some sort of farms, and also just allow them to, tweak these results to try and, add different nutrients to it, to the lunar regolith, do some modifications that might make the plants grow better, and basically just do different things to develop this research, and eventually, once we get to the moon, on a more permanent basis, we can actually, grow some plants and be able to survive better. So I hope you found this interesting. I'll link the article and this paper in the description if you want to check those out. But yeah, I guess like, comment, subscribe if you enjoyed the video, and I'll see you next time.